Hello, I'm BJ Martino, president of the Terrence Group, and today I'm going to give a brief look at the 2024 presidential election results through the lens of three factors fundamental to the outcome of the race. They are, simply put, change, the issues, and realignment. The first factor is that 2024 was certainly a change election. One way to see this is through the lens of President Biden's job approval. After the withdrawal from Afghanistan, President Biden's approval eroded through the end of 2021, and he never recovered. It reached a new low point in early July of this year during the post-debate discussion as Democrats started to beat the drum for a replacement. It recovered a bit, but ended up at 39% approve to 59% disapprove on Election Day. Now, in the 2022 midterms, it's my view that Democrats were somewhat shielded from Biden's job disapproval by the conclusion many voters had drawn that he was either not really in charge or was not running for re-election. Why send a midterm message to a president you don't think it'll mean anything to? But in 2024, candidate Harris repeatedly refused to draw distinctions between herself and the Biden administration, instead trying to reframe change as about the character of the person in office and protecting democracy. We'll see how those failed in a moment. Now, another factor driving change was voter dissatisfaction. A supermajority of voters were dissatisfied or angry about the way things were going in the country, and Donald Trump largely won these voters. Now, this is not a new sentiment. Gallup data going back 25 years shows the country rallied around after the events of 9/11 for about 2 years, which then saw satisfaction dropping below 50% and dropping steadily through the end of 2008 and the banking crisis when it was under 10%. The Obama honeymoon rallied to over 30%, climbing through Trump's first term to the start of COVID. It was 42% in March of 2020, then dropping and remaining in the mid-20s, 26 here on Election Day since then. The classic "are you better off than you were 4 years ago" test does show some voters felt better about the country during Trump's term than they did during Biden's. Finally, when asked about what they were looking for in a president, the most important qualities selected were leadership and change. Combined, Trump won these voters around 2-1. While the Trump brand has always included strength of leadership, the most telling result is the ballot among those who wanted a change candidate. Defining change around voter sentiments about the direction of the country and the most important issues, rather than around personalities, won the day. Now let's turn to issues. There's a lot to digest here, but let's start with the two issues most often selected by voters as most important in the exit polling. The state of democracy was at 34% and the economy at 32%. These two issues sorted voters at about a 4-1 rate, Trump winning 4-1 among those who chose the economy, Harris 4-1 among those who chose democracy. Now combined, if you saw democracy and abortion combined for 48% and economy and immigration for 43%, you might come to the conclusion of a narrow Harris win in the popular vote. However, Trump won immigration voters 10-1, while Harris won abortion voters only about 3-1, while Trump won the few foreign policy voters as well. But which top issue, economy, state of democracy, dominated voters' decision making? Let's take a look. Now, when asked about their views of the condition of the U.S. economy, 2/3, 68% of voters said the economy was poor or not so good. While jobs numbers were better, although revisions have suggested not as good as those initially released, and the rate of inflation has come down, statistics don't pay the bills for families. They were still dealing with the after effects of higher prices, waiting for wages to catch up, while figuring out how to deal with the depleted savings and higher debts they'd accrued. Starting with Bidenomics and being told that things were better now, voters found these arguments running counter to their own experience in the economy. As a result, there's a clear correlation between view of the condition of the economy and the vote for president. You can see those who said the economy is poor, fully 85% voted for Donald Trump. Those who said the economy was good or excellent, nearly 90%. But for that middle third of those saying it's not so good, Donald Trump won those voters by 8 points. And when asking now about the state of democracy in America, you can see 73% of voters on election day say democracy is threatened here. But the result is Donald Trump won those voters very narrowly. So while 34% said the state of democracy was their number one issue, it was spread between those who think it's very or somewhat threatened here. And there are Trump voters who also believe democracy is threatened. So while what voters meant by change differed, so does what they believe is threatening democracy. And we should take a moment to talk about the issue of abortion as well. While abortion was at just 14% in terms of voters saying it was a top priority, we know from the 2022 elections how effectively Democrats used the issue to define Republicans as extreme. Now, nearly 2/3 of voters take a pro-choice type position on this question, with 33% saying abortion should be legal in most cases. Those voters were evenly split on the presidential ballot. Donald Trump, who had nominated the justice who gave the Supreme Court the majority to overturn Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision, split voters who said abortion should be legal in most cases. The third and final fundamental factor is the realignment that has occurred in our electorate. These demographic changes and the composition of the Republican and Democratic votes. The unique coalition Trump started putting together in 2016 of voters in the most distressed and rural communities, less educated voters, was reinforced in 2024. While a gender gap continues, the rise of the education gap is critical to understanding this new realignment of our national voting behavior. Now, realignment is a term which is often thrown out too casually by cable news networks on election nights, but it's really about new cleavages in voting patterns that are durable and result in policy changes. The 2024 election confirms what we've seen over the last decade is a true realignment. Voters with a bachelor's degree or more are more likely to vote Harris and Democrat. Those with something less than a bachelor's degree are more likely to vote Trump and Republican. Now, using county level data, election returns, and knowing that income is correlated to education, here we can see that that gap did blossom in 2016 and is sustained through the 2024 cycle. Even though Donald Trump came up a bit with high earning counties, the gap between those in less and more affluent places remains. Now, a sidebar to that populist realignment, and we mentioned the gender gap earlier, and it still clearly exists, but the myth of the silent Harris female voter appears to have largely been just that. But looking within the minority populations of the electorate, we see Donald Trump peeling off 1 in 5 black men, winning Latino men, and splitting all other races, including Asian voters in that group. Now, it's certainly too soon to describe this as a realignment, but Trump did build a winning multi-ethnic coalition. There's nothing to indicate whether or not it will be durable. We'll see that as we head into the midterm and the 2028 presidential cycles. Now, there are certainly other lessons and takeaways from the results of this recent election, but those three fundamentals of change, issues, and realignment go a long way in telling us what really happened. Thanks for listening.